Hello everyone, Vanguard of Valor here, and welcome to Sublevel Zero. So, what is Sublevel Zero all about? It is, in short, a first-person, rogue-like, 6 degrees of freedom shooter. It's pretty cool, and for people who are familiar with older games like Descent, it's very reminiscent of that, as we're exploring an ancient robot-filled facility trying to get to and destroy a core in a maze-like environment. So, let's hop into it and see what it's like in action here. As we go to start a game, we have a variety of ship options. There's 7 in total, and a variety of them are locked to begin with just the standard gunship open. The challenges to unlock them are pretty difficult, like destroying 300 enemies with plasma weapons in one run, or beating a level with 85% accuracy or better while also dealing 5,000 damage, which means you can't do it in the early levels because there's just not enough damage to deal there. But we're going to hop into the game with a standard gunship so we can get a good feel for what the game's all about, and then we will go from there. So we're going to skip the plot today. Basically, the universe is coming apart at the seams. We found an ancient facility which seems to have high-tech technology in it. While going to explore it, we get trapped in a pocket subdimension. We need to get to the cores in each area to get flux drive elements that'll let us escape this place and possibly learn if we can save the universe. So, here we are. We're starting off in a very simple, glitchy room, apparently. Wow, game didn't like that for a second. Holy cow, I've never seen that before. That's a weird new one. Anywho, we start off in a very simple little room here. We can maneuver our way around forwards and backwards, left and right, up and down, and we can spin in either direction if we so please. And we're going to have to use those abilities to move, as well as dashing by holding shift, to make our way through this facility. Every time we explore these facilities, they are largely randomly generated and full of hostile robots. So, as you can see, we have a little bit of a varied arsenal to deal with these guys at our disposal. That's a dead end right there. And we're going to try and get our way through here, taking minimum damage, so that we can hopefully survive and find all manner of new exciting things. So, game is made in Unity. It runs fairly well, as you can see. Occasionally things slow down a tiny bit when we're having lots of enemies or explosions or things on screen, but generally it runs pretty smoothly on my computer, which is decent but not incredible. And it looks pretty nice. It's got a very neon aesthetic to it, and while it's not super high fidelity images, the art style I feel works definitely in this situation. There's a lot of polygonal stuff going on here too, but I think it works pretty well for this game. Now, as we're trying to make our way through here, we have a couple different tools that are at our disposal. For one thing, we have a fairly nice 3D map here that allow us to see the levels as we explore them. It's not super important a lot of the time, because largely the levels do follow a fairly linear pattern, especially in the early game. Later on, they get a little bit more elaborate, and sometimes it can be useful to go back and check the map to see where things are branching. But all of these levels are randomly generated from these different components. So you can see there's rooms here with the tunnels between them, and we also have areas like this which are dead ends, because in a different level generation that might have taken us somewhere, but not in this case. So there's some interesting varied potential there, which is pretty cool. What we're going to do though is we're going to hop back into it. In addition to our basic tools like being able to check our map and make sure we're going in the right direction, which we weren't, we also have a variety of weapons at our disposal. As you can see here, we have some primary weapon options. I already showed off both our pulsar and our autocannon, which we can easily switch between on the fly. They both fire in slightly different ways, they both function slightly differently, but they're fairly similar since they're both tier 1 weapons and they're not that elaborate, but things do change up to be a little bit more complicated later on, which can be fun. Now, using your weapons carefully is definitely important to success in this game, because for one thing, your weapon use will determine whether or not you have ammo when you need it for the various different types of things you'll find. Our pulsar here uses energy ammunition, while our autocannon uses bullets, and if we rely too heavily on one, we'll run out of that type of ammo and won't be able to use it again until we can find some more. We also have rockets and a grenade system on the right side of our ship here, which gives us some other options. Our secondary weapons generally have much more limited ammo, but are high firepower, high damage options if we really need to clear something in a hurry. So we have some dumbfire rockets here, as well as grenades, which will bounce off surfaces. They all have their own costs as well. You'll notice that the dumbfire rockets take 1 missile to fire, while the grenades take 2. Autocannon takes 6 bullets to fire, while the pulsar uses 0.7 of an energy when it fires, but it fires at a fast rate. So you have to consider these kinds of things when we're trying to make our way through the level, but generally, they will help us do what we need to do. So as we explore our way through here, we're looking for a couple different things. Every time we kill enemies, we are going to get some randomized drops from them. And that's pretty important. There's some things here which are like weapons we can pick up, which may help us out along the way, and they also drop those little tokens we saw. Sometimes those are extremely valuable to us, and other times they're not quite so good. Generally, though, enemies will drop nanites, and nanites are one of the most important things for us to find in this game because they have two major purposes that are important to us. We'll grab all these things and look at them in a second here. But nanites are good because they're both experience and currency. There's the little purple things with the ends on them here. If we pick them up, they will contribute towards us being able to get a perk choice at the end of this stage, and we can use them to use the game's crafting system, which we'll also get into later. In addition to... Ooh, hello, that's a nasty looking room. In addition to that kind of thing, there are also available... oh boy, yeah, this is a bad room. We're going to use some grenades here, I think. We probably could go for just regular rockets, but grenades have a bit of extra punch, and that'll make it a little bit easier for us, because we want to try and not take any damage if we can. But, in addition to dropping nanites, the enemies generally also drop ammunition of various types. If we have a full ammo counter, we'll be able to pick them up, so we have a couple here left floating in the air because we haven't been using any plasma-class weapons, but that will help us to keep ourselves going. And there's also treasure chests like this one, which often have ammo and nanites inside, occasionally with some other fancier bits. So, using all those things together, that's great. There's one other very important type of item that can be dropped by enemies, though, and that is med packs. We haven't actually found any of them so far in this run, but they are very useful. We start with one on our vehicle here, and we can use them at any time to start slowly regenerating health. It is a slow effect, though, so if we're taking a lot of damage in a hurry, we can actually get brute forced down before we have the chance to take advantage of the healing our medkits have. So you have to be a little bit careful about your health in this game. It is definitely one of your most valuable resources, and if you don't use it well, you will quickly find yourself in a world of hurt. Now, there's a nice health kit for us. We can grab that one, and that'll let us heal up after the damage we've taken in this fight if we want, or we can hold on to them for later. But they do keep taking up our inventory space, so if we're not using them, we'll be able to carry less other things, which could be a problem in its own right. As it stands, though, we're doing an okay job of staying alive here. You'll notice that that missile there we fired, the grenade, does have an area effect, and we can be hit by that as well if we're not careful. So you have to be a little bit cognizant of what we're doing, otherwise we're going to wind up blowing ourselves up, which wouldn't be great. So, we're approaching the core of the first stage, and we found a bunch of items in the level. So many, in fact, we've maxed out our inventory. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure there's no treasure chests down here, which there is. We'll grab that. There we go, get our loot for the stage, and then we're going to take a look at the crafting system before we go into the boss room. And we'll also make sure we haven't missed any rooms, because that's always a possibility. If we did miss a room, but it doesn't look like we did this time, looks like our first Sublevel Zero is very linear. They're normally a little bit more diverse than that. We can take a look at what we can do with our crafting system, and how the actual upgrade system works, because we found a bunch of interesting things here. So, we have found a bunch of items with a variety of modifiers on them. You'll notice that the starting weapons we had are all straight up just a pulsar or an autocannon or a dumbfire missile, and they all have 3 blocks in each of the 3 major categories out of 5. Now, in some respects, these categories don't do a whole lot, but in others, they're fairly important, so we're going to get into exactly what they do. When you get a weapon with a modifier, that modifier determines how many blocks they have in each of these categories. So the useless grenade here is not very good. It has an extremely low rate of fire, so we have to wait a long time before being able to fire another one. In this case, it has 0 rate of fire, which I haven't actually seen before. It has reduced damage and reduced splash. While it is more powerful than our basic dumbfire missiles already, it's much worse than another grenade might be. However, the other grenade we have is a crude grenade, so while it has a little bit more damage, it's still not great. We can swap it over if we want, and use it instead, but these negative modifiers mean that some of the weapons you find are not going to be fantastic. We could also switch it over for a homing missile, which has less damage but will track enemies if we want. In addition, we found a positive modifier in some respects and a negative modifier in others for our autocannon here. It fires faster than the autocannon does, but does pretty significantly less damage and at a little bit less accuracy. So there's a bunch of weapons that are of various qualities for us to choose between. There are also, however, varied engines and varied hulls for us to find. We haven't found any new hulls yet. They can have varying amounts of health for you to use, varying amounts of primary and secondary ammo capacity, and varying inventory space. The engines also have different qualities. They give a basic speed, a boost speed, and a ramming damage. The scout engine we have here is really fast for boosting, but not very fast base speed and low damage. And this is a standard engine with almost identical stats to the one we've got right now. So there's a variety of different things in here that are relevant. This one actually is a pretty bad standard engine, surprisingly enough. It has some pretty negative modifiers on it, so using this standard engine instead would just be a straight upgrade on it, which is fine by me. So we'll use this one instead of one we have already. And that's basically how the items go. As you explore through the game and find new things, you can put them to use, and they're generally pretty handy. Now, there's also a couple other important things, though. While we have all these different items, you'll notice that new crafting available message comes up. If we check out the crafting menu, there's a lot of different things we can try to make here. We could try and make jump jet engines by combining our engine pieces together, adding our scout engines to a standard engine and making a jump jet engine. This thing is nice and fast and has good boost, but has low ram damage. Or we can make concussion missiles by combining grenades and dumbfire rockets. These have a stun effect, and you can detonate them when you want by holding and releasing, which is pretty cool too. We could combine our autocannons and pulsars to make miniguns, and you'll notice that depending on the weapons we combine, they have different stats. This minigun, which uses the autocannon and the pulsar, has pretty average stats, and this one, which uses the riot autocannon, is very similar, has slightly better rate of fire, slightly lower damage, and slightly lower accuracy. So depending on the weapons that you combine, you can get different things out of them. We'll make a quick minigun here so we can see how they work, because it's pretty cool to be able to modify our tools like this, but it does give us a problem now of only having one weapon type. So we'll go through forwards with this a little bit, and we'll see what else we can do here. Now, if memory serves, we do have access to some other fairly interesting things here. If we work our way down here... Oh, no, it's on the other side. I believe there are potentially another weapon for us over there that we can grab, and then we'll go in and fight ourselves a boss and see how that goes. What's our weapon down here? I guess not. Alright, let's go in with our minigun then, and see if we can't clear out the boss room. So, for Sublevel Zero, this is our core. The cores generally look fairly similar, and this room is incredibly easy. There's hardly any defenses in here at all. But as we move into the higher level sublevels, these rooms start to get better and better defended to the point where it may be a lot more challenging to successfully defeat the core, because the core will eventually gain defenses of its own, being able to shoot high-speed bullets, lasers, and all manner of nastiness. As it stands right now, though, the core is defeated, and we'll be able to move on to the next stage whenever we choose. So, let's grab the nanites they've dropped here, because that'll let us choose from the perk system, and then we'll grab whatever else we found. What is this? This is a firebolt. That's a fun alternate weapon type, so we'll drop... Actually, let's just pick this up, I think. Yep, there we go. Now we have a firebolt, which is a semi-automatic weapon that overheats if you spam it, so it's pretty cool. Fires like that. Not the most accurate of weapons, but a nice alternative option. Uses a different ammo type, using plasma instead. We'll grab ourselves our flux drive component, and the exit appears, so we'll fly into it and get out of here. So that's the basic setup of the game, but now, as a result of acquiring more nanites, we can choose a perk for the rest of the playthrough. In this case, we have less lethal, a slight increase in chance for all weapons to stun enemies, but a slight decrease in damage. We can get spray and pray, fire rate is slightly increased but accuracy slightly decreased, or energy dynamo. Energy dynamo gives us ammo regeneration being increased significantly, the maximum held is sharply reduced. So, these will sort of affect how our play style goes. This is an interesting combination. I've never seen these before. Let's take spray and pray. Why not? And then, having chosen our perks, we get a little summary of what we've done on that mission. Enemies killed, damage taken, damage dealt, all that kind of good things. Our most powerful weapons, most commonly killed enemies, and all that. If we hop into another level here, we'll be able to see that it is largely the same kind of strategy. We start in a starting room, we have to make our way to the core, kill all the robots. But surprise, surprise, the robots get significantly more dangerous as we go. So we'll have to improve our weapons by crafting new and more elaborate combinations. We will have to hopefully find more interesting tools to use as well, because the different items can combine in different ways, which can keep things interesting. And generally, it's just pretty enjoyable. So Is there anything interesting in here? What do we have here? We have a Relentless Shredder, which is like a shotgun-type weapon. So there's a lot of different stuff for us to find if we're exploring around. We have to be a little bit careful about our inventory space, because it's very easy to run out of room. We could combine, for example, our Shredder and our Firebolt to make a flat cannon, but we're getting shot at because that's not a pause menu. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff that goes on in here, and it is pretty challenging. The later levels get really nasty. You run into some pretty unpleasant enemy types later on. It's important to note that you can, for example, shoot down enemy projectiles. If people are shooting missiles at you. Let's see if we can do it here. You can actually shoot them. There is friendly fire, so you can make enemies shoot each other like we saw there. So there is a good amount of strategy into some of these areas and how to maneuver your way through them safely and how to get through combat encounters without getting absolutely destroyed. But, yeah, it's a pretty interesting... Can I get it? Can I hit one of these? Apparently not right now. My aim is bad with these weapons. But it is possible to shoot enemy projectiles to destroy them, so that's not necessarily a bad idea. Let's take this guy out here. We'll talk about a couple of the other little issues I have with the game. So... There's a different type of secondary, which is a dart-type missile launcher. But anyway, there's a couple different things that I think are a little bit problematic with the game. So we'll talk about them quickly here, and while we fly around a little bit. And one of them is that, as you can see here, this is a dead end we've flown to. And the dead end was pretty early in the level, but a lot of the time the game only has two paths. There'll be one path and an alternate path, and depending on where you go, if you choose the path that goes all the way to the core, you'll wind up way far away and have to backtrack all the way back just to experiment with the alternate path. Later in the game, I found that the random generation was a little bit better for that, and it didn't so consistently make a single fork in the road at the beginning of the level, which if you didn't choose, you would have to go all the way back. I found it was a little bit better for that later, but still not ideal, so... That was one thing that I thought was a little bit disappointing. The later level generation is better, but the early levels often involve a lot of backtracking just to make sure you don't miss anything. Beyond that, I think my other biggest gripe is just that because of the way the game's progression works, every time you lose a run or die, you're generally given some kind of an unlock. Whether it is a blueprint or a new perk that you could potentially get at the end of a run. A lot of those things are unlocked as you go, which means that they're not... I found there was not a huge selection of them available at the beginning. When you're starting out, there's a lot of the time you'll get perk selections which are all trying to force you to specialize into a certain type of weapon. And while that's fine, if you're taking something that makes all of your bullet weapons more powerful, but your plasma and energy weapons less powerful, it's really just encouraging you to experiment less with the different weapon types, which is kind of not what you want when you're just starting out. It's a fine upgrade to have if you know you want to try and specialize in something, but when you're just starting the game and want to play with all the tools you've got, it's not ideal. There is a good variety of them. I'm always finding new ones I haven't seen, so it's possible I just got really unlucky with my first few games, always getting not super exciting perks, but it's just something that I feel is not ideal. Same with the crafting system. Early in the game, a lot of the weapons that you can craft, or not a lot of the weapons you can craft. You can make a lot of weapons at the start of the game, don't get me wrong, but there are options that are not available to you until you've played more games. So I just feel like, well, it's not a bad system, letting you feel like you're finding new things as you go. It does feel like it limits your options in the very early game, so you have to play more to be able to do more cool things. Either way, though, overall, I've really been enjoying my time with this game. It has a really fun vibe to it. And it's just pretty enjoyable. So if we are to... Let's just pop this on here so we can see how these kinds of weapons work. There's a lot of this cool stuff in this game. The impact rifle, for example, is kind of like a railgun type weapon you can use to zap an enemy out with a straightforward shot, which is pretty cool. And it's just fun to experiment with the different weapons. Incidentally as well, the weapons that you combine can be further combined. Tier 1 weapons generally combine with other Tier 1 weapons to make Tier 2 weapons, which combine with other Tier 2 weapons to make Tier 3 weapons. And the Tier 3s get pretty crazy. As it starts out, you have, basic laser firing weapons, but eventually you can wind up with things like constantly firing super beams, you can get piercing railguns, you can get rapid fire explosive machine guns, and there's some pretty fun stuff to get out there if you can acquire the resources and the weapons and live long enough to actually put them together. So there's some pretty cool stuff available to you as a player there, which is always fun. As far as that goes, though, there's really one other major issue I have with the game, and it is only happening sometimes and under a very certain set of circumstances, but when it does happen, it is very irritating, and that is in windowed mode. This game sometimes has a habit of losing the ability to lock the mouse in place, and that is not good, because when it loses the mouse lock in a game like this, where you're spinning around a lot trying to target your enemies, it often means that you wind up unable to actually do anything, because when you go to click to attack an enemy, you wind up just clicking off the screen and pausing the game, so you have to regain focus before you can do anything else, which is not really ideal, so that's kind of unfortunate. That is my other biggest gripe with the game. Not to mention the fact that it really doesn't like fraps for some reason, and has crashed my video software a couple times while trying to record this. I've been using a variety of different things in order to try and get this footage recorded, but it still manages to crash them even when the footage records properly, so there's some weird things that are going on with that side of things. But that shouldn't affect anybody when they're actually trying to just play the game. That's just the thing that affects me, really. Anyway, this is Sublevel Zero. It's pretty cool. If you've liked what you've seen of it so far, there's a link in the description below so you can go pick it up for yourself on Steam. I find it quite enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to playing it a little bit more after this. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. This has been Vanguard of Valor, and welcome to Sublevel Zero.